Hey everyone, welcome to Food Talk Live. A reminder that this episode will also appear on Food Tank's podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. So please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Today I get to chat with somebody I really like who's doing phenomenal work in Washington, D.C. Tom McDougall is the founder and CEO of 4P Foods, which delivers local produce to folks who sign up through their program to select a bag, a quantity of food that they want. Then 4P emails them, informing them of the locality of their food, and then they deliver it to them a few days later. It's really awesome, fresh food right to folks' doors. Customers can then drop off their bags so that the company can reuse them for the next sale. For every 10th bag that 4P sells, the company donates a bag of food to one of their partners that assists food insecure families in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. I have known Tom for a long time. I'm a big fan of him and his work and all that he's really done to improve the food system in Washington, D.C. Tom, before we start, I just want to make sure you and your family are healthy. I know you're expecting another child soon.
Yeah, knock on wood and many blessings. We are good. We are good. It's a very paradoxical thing to be on the front lines and in the trenches as a emergency worker moving vegetables around, and then to have at-risk patients at home. But
Sure.
Such is the case, I think, with all food workers right now.
Yeah, you're very courageous, and we, I hope people celebrate that in your life, and I'm personally celebrating you and all that you do. One of the cool things that you've decided to do during the COVID-19 crisis is create this coalition. It's called the MidAtlantic Food Resilience and Access Coalition. Can you describe what that is and why you decided to do it?
Sure. Yeah, it's a loose but formal coalition of good food systems actors throughout the Mid-Atlantic that are all mobilizing in a way that is happening across the country to address the sort of phase one of this crisis, which is the emergency food relief, food access crisis, but also thinking strategically and thinking regionally about the second pending crisis, which is the food economy crisis.
Yeah.
We talk often with you, like 7 of the 10 lowest paying jobs in this country are in the food system. So as those folks hit the unemployment rolls and they hit those points of emergency access, we're going to have a much larger crisis that we might not be ready to deal with. So how do we keep them employed? And we decided to sort of lean into that because as a regional food hub, we have just a unique lens on the landscape here in the Mid-Atlantic. We have a lot of partners and farms and stakeholders in Virginia, same for DC, same for Maryland, obviously fewer farms in DC, but when this started to all unfold, my inbox, like I'm sure many of yours, just sort of started to explode. Like who's doing what's happening, what about the schools, and then who's helping and how to connect all those dots. And it became clear just from our vantage point that there were resources and opportunities in different parts of the region that other parts of the region weren't knowing about or didn't talk about would very much benefit from. So we decided first, let's start with communication. Let's get some of these regional partners talking to each other, and then let's start matchmaking. What are the assets that these different organizations, companies, and people are bringing to the table, and then a gap analysis. What do they need, and are there ways to connect dots that have never been connected before, both to solve the crisis right now, but to see if this is an opportunity to really galvanize local and regional food systems that are based on the principles of equity to become the new norm. And so we're putting it to the test.
Can you describe for viewers and listeners who are not from, the DC metropolitan area, sort of the food insecurity situation for a lot of folks, especially who are working in the food system, ironically?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's. I don't think necessarily the Mid-Atlantic is unique to many of the other regional food systems that exist. Like you have very extreme pockets of rural poverty in places like Appalachia and rural parts of Virginia and so on that experience the concept of lack of access in a very different way. But at the same time, in dense urban centers and suburbs, similarly, you could be surrounded by people in stores and somehow not have any equitable access to food. We were early on and was working with some of our farmers. It's also really understanding like what the farming access point looks like. Talking to one of my growers early on when we started, it was like, well, at least you guys eat well. Like the pork you produce is amazing. And he was like, no, we don't. He's like, I can't afford to eat our own product because I can get $7 a pound for this at the farmer's market, which I then go to the grocery store and get the 89 cent a pound stuff because it's all that we can afford to eat.
Yes, so ironic, right?
It's real.
You mentioned that this is a loose sort of coalition of formal and informal partners. Can you give some shout outs to some of the folks and organizations you're working with who are part of this?
Sure. Yeah. So we've tried to identify really key liaisons in each of our sort of geographic regions. So having a key liaison sort of in central part of DC, and then a couple of key liaisons in Ward 7 and Ward 8, one for Prince George's County, which is in Maryland, just on the other side of the line, Montgomery County, Northern Virginia, Greater Richmond, Charlottesville, et cetera, to have, there's in almost every case, there's a key either organization or person that has deep ties and connections to their community and who's doing what on the ground where. So structuring that, like Local Food Hub, for example, we've had a long partnership with, they're our key on the ground partner for Greater Charlottesville area. The Path Foundation is sort of Northern Piedmont. Loudon Hunger Relief is Northern Virginia. My screen has frozen, so hopefully you all can still hear me.
I can still hear you.
Okay, DC Greens is playing a key part in DC. Dreaming Out Loud, Montgomery Food Policy Council, PG Food Council, and we're slowly working our way into new partnerships up towards Baltimore and beyond. So,
awesome.
Yeah, it's been great.
That's fantastic. So, what resources do you need to facilitate this coalition to make your efforts expand and be successful? What kinds of things do you need?
Yeah, so it's that question is sort of the same question we're asking all the on the ground partners. Like, what do you need? Do you need trucks? Do you need food donated? Do you need shelf stable food or produce? Do you need a communications platform to get the word out? And then we take all of those sort of inbound needs, requests, and we put it to the coalition, to the network to say, well, who has these things? And then we work on connecting the dots. And that's been step one of this, is getting more that sort of communication flow going upstream and downstream at the same time. And then simultaneously, we're raising, we put a request to the philanthropic community to raise a $10 million fund that will be dedicated almost exclusively to, as we've described it, covering the Delta. Because there are a lot of programs and efforts that are going on right now for the emergency food relief efforts around the region, which is great and needed. Not a whole lot of the food that's being directed at those efforts, however, comes from the local and regional supply chain. Right. So you have farmers and food producers and food businesses like, yes, but like, what are farmers markets going to open and how am I going to? So is there a world where some of the feeding programs like the shelf stable backpack kits or the box models that are happening around the country, like they've got a box of pasta and a jar of sauce in there, which is great.
Right. What
would the world look like if that jar of sauce wasn't ragu? No offense, ragu, but like the tomato season is right around the corner here in the Mid-Atlantic. Can we procure all the tomatoes we could possibly get and then hire all of those restaurants and other workers who said, we want to mobilize our folks, we want to use our kitchens to do anything, but we need to pay them ideally. Let's pay them to churn out a whole bunch of sauce and then put that jar of sauce in the box. And the box now, originally the ragu sauce was maybe $2 for the food bank, the pantry, or whoever was putting those boxes together. And our fully loaded cost to keep the farmers paid and the workers paid and the distributors paid might be $5, but it's going to be really tasty sauce. That fund that we're raising is meant to cover that $3 spread, which kind of back to the spirit of it. It's like, how do we keep farmers farming, keep food economy workers working, and keep people fed?
So can regular folks donate to the fund, or are you only reaching out to, foundations and grant makers?
So we have a GoFundMe campaign that's going to go ongoing for this. That's allowed us to run smaller pilots, sort of proof of concept. We did like a 100% locally sourced Taco Tuesday. We're doing regularly Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday free meal distributions. All of those are fairly small scale, but that GoFundMe is allowing us to spool that up, which becomes sort of proof of concept and infrastructure that allows for some of the bigger funders to put into this bigger fund.
Absolutely. And that local procurement, local and regional procurement, procurement's never really sexy to talk about, right? But it's so important, especially right now. I
disagree.
No, well, I think it's interesting. Ag and food nerds think it's interesting. But can we talk about so you're doing this now to address an emergency, right? But by connecting the dots and bringing all of these people together, what will happen is this, I think your hope is, and tell me if I'm wrong, that it will stay in place after, 18 months from now, 6 months from now, whenever we're out of the crisis. And what will that look like, and what will that mean for farmers and eaters?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that give me hope on that front. Number one, like when this does go back to a new version of whatever the next normal is going to look like, there's been a whole lot of people pent up for a month, 2, 3, however long, and a whole lot of people are learning how to cook for the first time, or falling in love with cooking for the first time, or again, or like there's a shortage of yeast right now in the country because people are baking so much bread. Like that's wonderful. And while many of us will go flocking back to the restaurants in the way that we did, many of us will have a profound new sense of confidence and love in the preparation and enjoyment of food, especially with others. And I think that bodes very, very well for the grocery business, and specifically the local grocery business, because generally local, regional, seasonal food tastes better, and people that are preparing their own food begin to get that. So that is sort of a precursor, for us on the 4P food side. A lot of our wholesale business to restaurants and institutions have essentially evaporated, but we've leaned hard into expanding our direct-to-consumer business, and it's just exploding in the most beautiful way. So some of those customers will go back to the grocery store, but I think just for us as a food hub and other food hubs around the country that are experiencing the same surge in demand, we will be on more solid footing in terms of scale to really then start doing what is this next phase of food hub and regional food hub systems, is interconnected trade. Right now, a lot of the money, or a lot of the food that's going into our CSA bags is from the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative, which we helped form earlier this year. It's a network of hubs up and down the East Coast. And we're all working together in tandem to move asparagus up and down the East Coast, and potatoes and beets. And I've got a thing going with a bunch of Vermont cheese, hopefully, which is wonderful. So I think at the tail end of this, we'll be able to sort of wipe our brow and say, phew, but also look around and recognize that like regional distributors, regional food hubs, local farmers potentially saved the day. And I don't think too many people in society will forget that.
Absolutely. And I have similar hopes, on the other side of all this. And one thing that I think is becoming more and more clear to me, the more people I talk to, is that people are valuing food more, right? We all used to be able to go out basically 24 hours a day and get whatever we wanted and go to restaurants or go to, whatever supermarket. And now we can't do that. And I think people have a different appreciation for food. And what I hope that grows into is a greater appreciation for the people who grow it and the people who process it and slaughter it and, cook it and serve it. And that's what, I think one bright side. I've been talking to everybody, who's been on this show about that. What are your other hopes and dreams on the other side of this?
We are... But to build on that, I think that will, I think what you just said will stem from a more profound sense of empathy and love that we have for fellow humans. Yeah. Can we forever continue to close our eyes to the externalized cost of an industrial food system that continues to abuse the planet and people that are involved in it? Like, maybe not anymore. Which brings me to like my second hope. We are seeing very clearly the amplified impact of the institutions of racism and sexism and classism that have long empowered those in power to stay in power. It is that inequitable system upon which we've built so many things is really shedding itself right now. Those who have been marginalized for decades and centuries are being the worst hit right now. And I hope that we can come out of this with that profound new sense of empathy, but also honesty about having a conversation about what the future of our social structures need to look like.
Absolutely. I hope we can all be, have more empathy as we go through this. I want to go back to the Taco Tuesday program that you talked about, and that does two critical things, as far as I know. One, it's helping feed kids who are not getting their school lunches or their other school meals, and two, it's really helping the farmers in the region have somewhere to sell their wares. Can you talk a little bit more about it and how you came up with the idea?
I love tacos mostly. Yeah, no, it was, we have our core operation is in Fauquier County, which is sort of northern Piedmont region in Virginia. And the school system, when it shuttered, it took a while for them to get a feeding program going. And when they did, it left a little bit to be desired. And
Sure.
so being that's our home community for many of our staff, we felt like there was an opportunity to we got to do something, and let's do
Sure.
something. And meanwhile, like our warehouse on the other side of the parking lot is a woman-owned catering company, and I was getting word that they were laying everyone off, and she's shutting down. And then meanwhile, our farmers, we had several farmers that had a couple of big orders that were going to universities that same week: University of Virginia, James Madison University. A wonderful cheesemaker in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and ground beef producer that we work with. And when those orders hit those docks, it was the day that the universities closed, so they got rejected basically. And so not only were they out the revenue, but they were sitting on products, or we were sitting on their product that was about to go to waste. So it was like, well, we got ground beef, we got cheese, and then we work with a woman-owned company in Charlottesville that makes tortillas, and another woman-owned company in Richmond that makes amazing salsa. And we work with a guy named John McMahon who makes killer greens in a greenhouse in Schuyler, Virginia. So we got all the pieces for tacos here.
Yeah.
So we bought all of that from them. And then we sent it to the catering company I was mentioning. It was keep some of those folks on the line. Let's keep them paid, and let's turn all this stuff into 1,500 tacos. And we did, and we put 3 tacos per meal and gave out 500 meals. And while it was, intended originally with children in mind, the people that came out, and we've been doing it every Tuesday and Thursday since. It hasn't been tacos every time, but it's everyone, right? It's folks young and old. It is the kids, it's the family of the kids, it's the elderly, it's the elderly neighbor's friend because the elderly neighbor is homebound, and the meals are going. So it's a pay what you can model. Big shout out to Citizens for Fauquier County. Like on our first day, we gave out 500 tacos. It cost almost exactly $5,000 to fully pay everyone in that supply chain. So it was a good $10 meal. And we got somewhere like $200 and something in the bucket. And then Citizens for Fauquier County, which is sort of a philanthropic group, they came up and put $20,000 in the bucket.
Amazing.
And keep going.
That's fantastic. That's great. And you're giving people joy, I think, during this much need. They need it right now. People need to have a little bit of fun and have something to look forward to every week. That's really amazing. One of the things that I've been reading a lot about during this crisis is how a lot of food is being wasted. You see piles of vegetables, being sort of left in landfills, and recently milk processors were asked dairy farmers to pour out milk, and it's just such a critical time for our food system to remain stable. What efforts has your coalition or 4P Foods done to help farmers so that they don't that they're not forced to waste food during this time because they can't get it where it needs to go?
Yeah, the first thing I'll just sort of emphasize on that, how I've been dealing with it, because we've been throwing out food here and there along the way where things get missed and there's a mismatch.
Sure.
It's Jose Andres did an op-ed in the New York Times 2 weekends ago, I think, and he really articulated the fact that during crisis, the hardest thing that everyone is trying to do is coordinate and match supply with demand. And that is a near impossible feat. The military can't do it accurately during emergency mobilization. That is a fantastically hard feat. So waste is unfortunately going to be there. And so I've invited all of our partners, yes, be aware of that, plan for that, get creative about dealing with not having that be an issue. But when it is an issue, because it's inevitable, we've got enough on our plates. Don't carry that guilt home with you at night.
Sure. Absolutely.
But all that to say, I think there's a real opportunity because kitchens are closed right now. How do we catch it before it goes to waste and process it and turn it into a shelf-stable thing, or freeze it, or something. And that's where this coalition, I think, has some validity, because it's suddenly we're sitting on 10,000 pounds of spinach. Who's got a good like frozen pesto thing that we can do,
Right.
or
Right.
whatever. Yeah. So
it takes a lot of creativity during this time.
Yeah,
And
and a lot of partners, a lot of logistics, a lot of communication to find things in real time and make those matches.
So in addition to, doing this proof of concept and trying to raise money for the coalition and making it work, what do you think policymakers should be doing to help farmers and companies like yours during this time? Because you live in the nation's capital or near the nation's capital. What could they be doing that they're not doing enough of?
I think they could be supporting more and more SNAP resources. I think they could be streamlining the ability for SNAP to be used online.
Absolutely.
I think they could be much more clear about what the parameters should be, and need to be to support farmers markets, be them digital, virtual, pull up, aggregated, like whatever. I think there needs to be more direct support for farms. There needs to be more conversation around the solutions for the undocumented workers that work in our food system, whether it's the folks that are harvesting food in the fields or washing the dishes in the back. Because it's nice to get maybe a $1,200 check in a couple of weeks, except for those who don't. What about that? And then I think this idea, I mean, I'm biased, right? Because this is our theory of change here with this coalition. I think this idea of using federal dollars to feed people is a good one, but using federal dollars to feed people with an eye towards preference towards local and regional, place-based, independently owned economies and systems is going to keep things from getting much worse.
And it's going to increase food security and economic security down the line. So the more that, people like you can prove that this works, and it does, I think lawmakers will begin to take notice. So thank you for doing what you're doing. I know it's incredibly hard work. And as I said before, I know you're going out there every day and being very brave. So thank you. I'm wondering, all of this is really heavy stuff, and I want to end on something at least a little bit hopeful. Is there a particular person or organization you've worked with over the last 4 weeks that has really inspired you, somebody who you think about, who just kind of keeps you going?
Like everybody right now, it's truly the thing that I get like teary-eyed about and inspired by is just, we've had these relationships with so many different organizations for years, and they're the kinds of relationships where we're very much on the same page of like, we need a more equitable system. We need a fundamental change in the way that capitalism measures and doesn't measure externalities.
Absolutely.
And then let's bang our heads against the wall a little bit more and have a beer and complain about this, because we're going nowhere fast. And in some instances, we're going in the wrong direction.
Sure.
So to now be able to call one another and say, I think this is our time, right? Isn't it? Oh yeah, this is definitely our time. Let's do this.
Right.
Everybody rising to the occasion, because it's for a long time it has been our collective movement, and now is our moment to prove what we can do.
Well said. That is so well said. So where can people find out more information about both the coalition and 4P Foods?
Sure. We just stood up a fairly rudimentary but functional, and we'll continue to build on it, website. The MidAtlantic Food Resilience and Access Coalition. I can put it in the chat. The website is the acronym, which is just mafrac.com, MAFRAC. That will ultimately, in the near days, have an inbound need sheet. So anyone that is looking for help, that needs resources, it'll come in. And then we'll have an operations team that has sort of an asset board that looks to make immediate matches for those needs and the haves. And then our website is just 4pfoods.com. The number 4, the letter P is in people, foods.
And we'll have both websites available on the Food Tank website in the article about this episode with Tom. Tom, thank you so much. You are an inspiration, and I don't know how you're doing all of this amazing work with one kid already and another one on the way. So keep up the good work. A reminder to everyone to join us back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. when I'll be talking to Chef Eric Bruner Yang. And then Kathleen Finlay from the Glenwood Center for Regional Food and Farming at 5 p.m. This episode with Tom will also appear on Food Tank's podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. Thank you again, Tom. Please stay well.
Yeah, and thank you. I mean, I do need to say, like, the I is not I, it is we. Thank you to all the partners and folks that are out there listening. They're in the trenches doing it, like healthcare workers and food system workers. I see you. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Bravo. Stay well, Tom.
Thanks. You too.